Most horror stories are told from the perspective of innocent people. A random victim hears noises downstairs, notices someone watching from outside their window, or realizes they aren't alone in the woods. But these stories are different, because the people telling them openly admit they were the problem. These were people who lied, stole, stalked strangers, broke into homes, and manipulated innocent people for fun. At the time, every single one of them thought they were in control. They believed they were smarter than everyone around them. They convinced themselves that they could keep crossing lines without consequences ever catching up to them. But eventually, something changed. One by one, each of these people found themselves trapped in situations so terrifying that even years later they still can't explain what really happened. Some of them were hunted through the woods at night. Some began hearing voices where nobody should have been. Others became so paranoid they were afraid to sleep inside their own homes. And the worst part about all of this is that none of them know whether what happened to them was revenge, coincidence, or something far darker. By the end of these stories, you'll realize one disturbing thing connects every single one of them. The moment they stopped feeling like predators and started feeling like prey.
The first man admitted right away that he wasn't a good person. In fact, he described himself as someone who spent years becoming exactly the type of criminal most people fear running into. During the early 2000s, he traveled from town to town committing robberies against elderly couples living in isolated areas. He had created a system that worked almost every time because he understood one important thing about human nature. Older people often want to help someone who appears desperate, so he used that kindness against them. Every few days, he would drive through small rural towns looking for the perfect target. He searched for homes far away from neighbors, preferably somewhere surrounded by woods or empty roads where nobody would hear shouting or notice suspicious activity. Once he picked the right couple, he would wait until it got dark before beginning his act. Around 9 o'clock at night, he would rush to the front door, pretending to panic. He always used the same story. He claimed his wife was in a hospital nearby, about to give birth, and that his car had suddenly broken down. The elderly couples almost always reacted exactly how he expected. They would rush him inside, offer him a phone, and try calming him down. That was when he tied them up and robbed the house. He constantly told himself he wasn't truly evil because he never seriously harmed anyone, but deep down he knew exactly how twisted his actions were becoming. Eventually, the robberies stopped feeling dangerous and started feeling routine. That confidence would nearly get him killed.
One night, while driving through another isolated area, he spotted a house sitting almost completely alone on a quiet road. There were woods stretching endlessly behind the property and barely any nearby homes. To him, it looked perfect. The setup matched every other successful robbery he had done before. He parked his car near the road and walked toward the front door, already rehearsing the fake story in his head. But the second the elderly woman answered the door, something felt different. Usually, his victims looked nervous or confused when they opened the door late at night. This woman didn't react that way at all. She looked strangely calm, almost amused. Even while he frantically explained that his wife was in labor and he needed help immediately, the woman barely showed concern. Instead, she smiled at him slowly and invited him inside like she had been expecting him. The way she spoke unsettled him almost instantly. She calmly guided him into the living room and repeatedly told him not to worry because everything was going to be okay. The problem was that her tone didn't sound comforting, it sounded unsettling. Before he could even process the strange feeling growing in his stomach, a massive younger man walked into the room holding a hunting rifle. That immediately destroyed the robber's confidence because younger people usually weren't easy to manipulate. This man looked strong, intimidating, and dangerous. The woman explained that the younger man was her son and that he would go check the car outside. The second the son walked out the door, panic quietly began building inside the robber's chest. If the son looked at the car closely, he would realize nothing was wrong with it. And before the robber could figure out what to do next, the woman started screaming for her husband to come into the room as well. Suddenly, he wasn't dealing with helpless elderly people anymore. He was trapped inside a house with multiple people who all seemed strangely calm about the situation.
As the old husband slowly limped into the room, the atmosphere became even more disturbing. Nobody seemed panicked. Nobody seemed concerned about helping him. Instead, the family quietly stared at him in complete silence while slowly moving closer. That was when he finally noticed the smell inside the house. It wasn't normal body odor or a dirty home smell. It was something much worse. Rotten, heavy, almost impossible to ignore once he became aware of it. The smell instantly made his mind race because it felt like something inside the house was seriously wrong. The old woman kept asking him strange questions while inching closer toward him. At the same time, the husband subtly mirrored his movements anytime he stepped toward the front door. Every survival instinct inside him suddenly started screaming that he needed to leave immediately. He lied and said he needed to grab something from his car, but the old woman kept trying to stop him while asking why he suddenly wanted to leave. The entire interaction felt unnatural. He realized he wasn't controlling the situation anymore. The moment he got close enough to the door, he sprinted toward it. The old man lunged, trying to grab him, but he managed to escape outside. For a split second, he felt relief. Then he looked at his car. Every single tire had been slashed. The family already knew he was lying. While he stood there frozen in disbelief, he heard shouting coming from inside the house. That was the moment he understood something horrifying. The people inside weren't frightened victims. They had been preparing for him.
With no working car and nowhere to go, he made the desperate decision to run into the woods behind the house. The darkness swallowed him almost instantly as branches snapped beneath his feet while he sprinted deeper into the trees. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear anything else. After several minutes, he crouched behind a large tree, trying to stay completely silent. Then he heard footsteps, heavy footsteps moving slowly through the woods. He realized the younger son was hunting him with the rifle. The footsteps kept getting closer until they sounded like they were directly beside him. Terrified, he slowly looked to the side and saw the massive man only a few feet away, casually walking through the darkness while swinging the rifle in his hand. Somehow, the man never noticed him hiding there. The robber later admitted that this was the closest he had ever come to genuinely believing he was about to die.
Once the man disappeared into the woods, he crawled back toward the road as quietly as possible. When he reached the house again, he saw the old woman standing motionless near the window, staring outside into the darkness like she was waiting for him to return. Somehow she didn't notice him sneaking toward the car. Knowing he had no better option, he climbed inside and rolled the ruined car down the road as far as possible before abandoning it completely and running back toward town. Even years later, he still believes whatever those people had planned for him was far worse than the robberies he had committed himself.
Another man admitted that his descent into criminal behavior started because of boredom. He worked overnight security at a large strip mall and spent most nights completely alone, watching cameras and walking through empty stores. At first, the job felt easy and peaceful, but after months of repeating the same routine every night, the boredom slowly became unbearable. Eventually, while checking camera angles, he noticed something unusual. One of the back entrances had a blind spot where cameras couldn't see properly. Instead of reporting it, curiosity took over. He began searching the entire mall for more blind spots and secretly testing them during his shifts. He would replay security footage to make sure cameras truly couldn't detect him standing in certain areas. Once he fully understood the layout, he started stealing small items from stores during the night. At first, it was harmless things like hats or shirts. Then it escalated into expensive shoes and merchandise. Every successful theft made him feel smarter and more confident. He genuinely believed he had perfected a system nobody could ever catch. But one night, while walking through one of the stores, he suddenly heard children laughing somewhere in the darkness. At first, he assumed teenagers had broken inside after hours, but no matter where he searched, nobody was there. The laughter echoed around him from different directions, while faint whispers surrounded him in the empty store. The entire thing felt impossible because he could hear movement everywhere without seeing a single person. Completely shaken, the security guard ran back to the office and reviewed the camera footage, expecting to finally see whoever had been hiding inside the store. Instead, the footage showed absolutely nothing except him wandering around yelling into empty aisles. There were no kids, no shadows, nothing. He tried convincing himself stress was causing him to imagine things, but a few nights later, the nightmare returned. While attempting to steal a pair of sneakers late at night, he heard movement rush past him, followed by the same eerie laughter from before. This time, though, he actually saw something. At the far end of an aisle, a small dark figure briefly stepped out and waved at him before disappearing again. Terrified, he ran toward the figure, only to realize the aisle was completely empty. Then came the moment that truly broke him mentally. Somewhere nearby, hidden in the darkness, a voice quietly whispered his full name. The moment he heard that, survival instinct completely took over. He ran back to the security office, nearly hyperventilating, and replayed every camera angle repeatedly, searching for proof that someone else had been there. But once again, the footage showed only him behaving erratically by himself. The next morning, his supervisor reviewed the footage and immediately became suspicious of him rather than any imaginary intruders. Since several stores had recently reported thefts, his bizarre behavior, combined with stolen merchandise found in his office, made him look guilty.
Realizing he was cornered, he quit on the spot before the investigation could expose everything he had been doing. But the part that still terrifies him years later isn't almost getting caught stealing. It's the fact that something in that empty store somehow knew his name.
The third confession came from a college student who described himself as lonely and socially awkward for most of his life. Everything changed when he got paired with a girl named Emily for a class project. She was friendly, easy to talk to, and for the first time in a long while, he felt emotionally attached to someone. After they exchanged phone numbers, he started looking through her social media profiles constantly. At first, he convinced himself it was harmless curiosity, but the obsession quickly became unhealthy. He carefully studied her photos, figured out where she spent time, and eventually discovered roughly where she lived. That eventually escalated into him driving by her house late at night just to watch from inside his car. He kept rationalizing his behavior by telling himself he wasn't actually approaching her or speaking to her. But deep down, he knew exactly how disturbing his actions had become. One night, while parked near her house, he noticed movement behind an upstairs window. Someone inside the house was staring directly back at him. Panic instantly overwhelmed him, and he drove away, terrified that Emily or her family had discovered everything. The next day at school, Emily casually mentioned that she believed she was dealing with a stalker situation. Hearing those words made his stomach drop because he immediately assumed she was talking about him. He stopped driving near her house after that, hoping the situation would disappear. Instead, something even worse started happening.
Only days after stopping his stalking behavior, strange things began happening outside his own house at night. He started hearing noises near his windows, soft tapping sounds, and movement outside in the darkness. Soon he began seeing shadowy figures standing near the blinds, watching him from outside. Every night the paranoia grew worse until he became terrified to even leave his room. He stopped attending classes entirely and spent most nights hiding in darkness, convinced someone was watching him constantly. During all of this, Emily continued texting him, asking why he disappeared from school so suddenly. In a moment of panic, he finally messaged her back and begged her to stop sending people to his house. Emily responded with complete confusion, making it obvious she had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. That realization terrified him even more because it meant somebody else had been outside his house all along. One night, the situation escalated completely when someone aggressively rang his doorbell late at night, demanding he open the door immediately. The voice outside sounded angry and forceful, not polite. Instead of answering, he hid upstairs in complete silence while the person repeatedly spammed the doorbell downstairs for nearly a full minute. By this point, he was mentally destroyed by fear and paranoia. Eventually, he temporarily moved out and stayed with family for several days until the strange activity stopped. He never learned whether anyone had truly been stalking him or whether guilt and fear had consumed his mind completely. But after experiencing what it felt like to constantly fear being watched, he never stalked anyone ever again. The final confession may have been the most disturbing because this man didn't break into homes to steal valuables. He broke into homes because he enjoyed invading people's lives. Everything started after he accidentally wandered into an unlocked house while construction workers were away. The thrill of secretly standing inside someone else's home became addictive almost instantly. Before long, he started studying neighborhoods, learning people's schedules, and sneaking into empty houses whenever owners left for work. At first, he simply wandered around observing their personal spaces, but eventually the excitement faded and he needed something more extreme. That was when he started calling himself a reverse thief. Instead of stealing things, he secretly left objects behind inside people's homes. Sometimes it was something small, like a folded blanket. Other times it was makeup or personal items designed to make homeowners suspicious of each other. In one especially twisted situation, he planted women's makeup inside a married couple's house and then hid nearby listening while the husband and wife accused each other of cheating. The chaos made him feel powerful. He loved creating fear and confusion inside strangers' lives without them ever knowing who caused it. But eventually, someone decided to play the same game against him. One afternoon after work, he walked into his kitchen and froze immediately. Sitting on the counter was a vase holding a yellow flower beside a handwritten note that simply said, "We know it was you." Instantly, the fear he had spent so long creating for others crashing back onto him. Over the following days, the messages escalated. More notes appeared inside his house, alongside dead birds and threatening warnings claiming they were coming for him. Then, things became even more terrifying when he began hearing movement and muffled voices coming from the basement through the vents inside the house. Convinced intruders were secretly living below him, he packed a bag and fled to his parents' house. Nearly a week later, he cautiously returned, only to discover even more disturbing objects waiting inside, including another dead bird and a toy car identical to his own vehicle. While preparing to leave again, he noticed an older couple standing silently across the street, staring directly at him. The woman slowly waved while holding the exact same yellow flower left in his kitchen. The man beside her never moved or spoke. They simply watched him quietly while he sped away in complete panic. To this day, he still has no idea who those people were or how they knew what he had been doing. But after spending years terrifying strangers for entertainment, he finally understood what true paranoia actually felt like.